All right, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? We are the last session here. Numbers don't lie. I'm joined today by Dr. Rashonda Frazier. I'm Dr. Edwards here in the Office of Leadership Effectiveness. And today, what we want to do is be able to, we know there's a mixture of people in the room who kind of get a kind of see who's in the room, but we want you to be able to take back what we're saying in order to help understand data, how your school and school leaders are working with data, and how you and those school leaders are addressing change, leadership change in your school district.
So, good afternoon once again. My name is Dr. Rashonda Frazier. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, on our agenda today, we're going to talk about data guides. What's happening in your schools? Empowering teachers. How can you do that? Data says change now what? And then we're going to save questions for the end. But if you have questions at any time, feel free. We're a small group. Raise your hand. So, we're going to start with data guides. What's happening in our schools? How are we looking at data in our schools? So, what data? What are schools looking at? What are school leaders looking for? So I want you to think about in your schools, and you think about your principals and your teachers. How many of us do we have any principals in here? All right, teachers. So everyone else is in the district office, right? So when we're talking about data in the schools, we wanted to know, when you go to the district office and they're discussing data with you as an administrator, are they just giving you data? Are we breaking it down? Are we looking at subgroups? Are we looking at how we can take it back to our schools and really help our students so we can have positive student outcomes? That's something we have to really start thinking about, because even when we're purchasing materials, it's important that we're looking at the data for each student and the students that we have. So in these data guides, we want to make sure that we can create an environment where data can thrive. So as we're looking at the materials that we purchase and all the things that we do with the funds that we have to make sure that we're still looking at the data. Do we have to take the time to talk about data? SLOs, because SLOs show us a lot. And do we have a protocol in our schools? So let's just think about this core idea. Can I get someone to read this for me?
No volunteers are waiting for.
I'm going to be on the job.
All right.
Cultures that make some of the biggest gains in student growth by moving their focus from what was taught to what was learned.
All right, so let's just think about that. Sometimes we look at teachers and we're like, what are they doing? What are they doing? But we need to know what students learn from what happened. The teacher is just a catalyst, and the students have to give them something back. But we have to create a space for that to happen. So we have to create a space so that we can learn about the data that's happening in our schools. And the only way we can create that space is to make sure that things are predictable. So where are my students? That's something you need to know. Where are the students in your district or in your schools? Protected time and progress monitoring. This is important. I love, back in the day, I think it was Teachers for Tomorrow, Teach for America, they used to use track me, and the kids would say, oh, track me. But what does that really mean, right? Are we tracking our students? Data check, we need to make sure that we're having data checks with teachers. How are we breaking down the data? So yes, I brought this to HMH program. Is it working? How do we know? We spend the money, but how do we know? We have to have those data checks. We have to have those benchmarks. We have to look at how our students are progressing. And where are my students? Does anybody know where the students are? The teacher in the classroom may know. Do their parents know? Do the students know where they are? And we need to make sure that we're protecting, we're having time for enrichment and intervention. A lot of times in Title I schools, we're always looking at the kids at the bottom, right? How do we move the bottom kids? How can we move the bottom kids? But what about the kids who are already at the top? They need enrichment. And our report card says that we have to move those kids too. Everyone has to move. And students need the opportunity to see their own data and progress. How do they do that? How do we know that students are seeing their own data and their progress? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So when we think about where are my students, what are we using to see where our students are? Are we using Are they reliable? Are they valid? So as you're giving out those funds, and we're saying, oh, this worked, how do you know? Did the teacher just teach what they wanted to teach? You just looked at their data? We need to make sure that we're looking at reliable data. Because I promise you, in a Title I school, they don't need not one more Pearson for a set of books. They don't need to. They have a lot of them. I've been in a lot of Title I schools. That's the only place I ever taught. We have a lot of books. But we have to make sure that we're using them effectively. So when we look at where our students are using those benchmarks such as already in math, we have to look at where they are school-wide and then break it down to the class and then down to each student individually. And then we're going to look for those trends. How do we create a school initiative? We have to look for trends. So thinking about when you're giving out funds, because we're in the fund capital, right? What are some school initiatives that you're giving out funds for? Thinking about schools looking at their data, they're saying, we need this because of this. Can you think of any school initiatives that we're actually funding? Based on data? PBIS? And we handed out those funds, we know that the program was effective. Should be checked out. Our referrals down. Our kids receiving the services that they need. Okay, now we're going to close, right? That's data. And so I think Dr. G has a school, he created school initiatives.
Right. So, being in the principal's chair, you really need to make sure that you're pushing especially with assessments and making sure that the students understand the importance of the things that they do, how it's going to help them be successful. So when I was at Wilson, what we did was, first thing we made sure that we had those monthly grade level meetings where we went over back then, we were looking at students moving from 9th grade to 10th grade, so transitioning from 9th grade to 10th grade successfully. We had a 9th grade academy. We also made sure, and we celebrated then our EOC success. So we were Wilson Tigers. We had title calls based on the goals for graduation rate, attendance rate, discipline, and also moving from 9 to 10. So making sure that the students have to understand their role in it. We always want to talk the data or the initiatives with our teachers, but do the kids who are actually part of those initiatives understand it? And then can they relate that and be able to discuss that even with their parents? So making sure that we drill down those initiatives, the things that we're doing, down to our students so that they can communicate that to their parents.
And a school initiative that we had at Kelly Evans, Wilson, South Carolina, where I was the assistant principal, we said that every student had to go 1 year or more. And the curriculum that we used iRate. iRate was very powerful for us. And when we thought about that, we were looking at our students, we just loved the way that they group students. We were able to give data on hand. Like if you ask any teacher in their classroom, how do they group their students, they can click the students and just tell you, this student is here and the reason why. What are they teaching in small groups? It made it very easy for them. And not only that, it made it easy for the students. We taught our parents how to use it. Because sometimes parents are just like, I just need to know what my students, what are you teaching at home? I already did that for you. They click the lesson, they can teach their kids at home, step by step. So it's important that when we create the trend, we look at the data, and then we create the trend. Not create the trend, and then wait for the data. And then we had to make sure we knew where all of our students were. It's important when we have these programs that we know that the students can interpret that data. How are they using the program? Is it effective? You have students who will say things like, this is hard. So why is it hard? Or teachers are saying, it's taking us too long to get through this. We have to go look at it in action. We have to go look at the practice. And then we have to see if the practices are effective. And then another way to see where your students are, we have to make sure that we're highlighting those standards when they're struggling and highlighting those standards where they exceed. And we can't move our students at all without creating those small groups. Small groups are for everyone, K through 12. And for middle school and high school, I know it's hard, right, for them to create those small groups. You don't have to send them off to professional group development. Send them down to a kindergarten, first grade, second grade classroom. They do it well. They do it really, really well. They create sense. And I'll give a story. My friend is a CTE teacher in Orangeburg. And I said, maybe you should small group your students. She said she's had the best 2 weeks ever. With 16 and 17-year-olds moving from center to center to center. She said it has been the easiest 2 weeks of her life. She said all year long, she never thought to just put the kids in center and let them move about the room. Where are my students? Is the instruction effective? And she saw it through her assessments. She's like, I've been more effective in the last 2 weeks than I've been throughout the entire year. But imagine if she would have done that from the beginning.
Right, and then one thing, especially when in identifying your students, you should encourage your schools to identify the students in their schools. Who are the students that they're going through? How should they be, actually labeled from the standpoint, what are their needs? And then you need to be able to develop ways to monitor those students and then providing support for them. So identifying the students, monitoring their progress, and then offering support.
And we offer that support through small groups. And so you created this school initiative. You know where your students are. Now I'm going to break it down to each individual student, and that's the SLO. And as school leaders, we have to make sure that we're looking at our SLOs and not just sending them off to be signed, right? It's not something that we just do, it's what we do. The SLO breaks it down for each individual student. So how are we going to grow our students? So we gave a handout of SLOs. So you can just scan the QR codes. It'll give you the business rules, tools that you need, guidebooks, and it also gives you guidance on the teacher leadership goal. And that goal can be written for teacher leaders in the building. Everyone doesn't write a teacher leadership goal, but that's for your coaches. We find that a lot of coaches aren't being evaluated. How do we know that they're effective? If we're spending money, how do we know that the coach is effective? They need a teacher leadership goal. How are we going to lead the teachers? What are our PLCs going to look like? Map it out so we can have positive student outcomes. That's what we're looking for. And then also when we're looking at SLOs, we have to have something to follow up. So you want the SLO, what are we going to do on PLCs? Our professional learning communities, they need to be predictable. Every time the teacher comes into that meeting, they need to know what's going to happen. And we know that PLCs are not long. It's really a planning period, once a week usually. But what's happening in that planning period once a week? So as a teacher, I know in PLC, we go and we have to talk about the tea that's going on in the school. Everybody has to look at the tea, especially when it's hot, right? We want to know what's going on. And then no planning happens. Nothing happened. But then we like to say, then we'll say, oh man, so what does it work? We don't like program, but we never really put that in the PLC to even know. So PLCs need to be predictable. And a PLC should consist of the standard of the week or standards. What do you want your kids to know? What do you want our students to know? The learning objectives. In kid-friendly terms and parent terms. You need those questions in. One of the things that we see in our data at the State Department is that we struggle when we look at teacher evaluations for question and thinking. Right? I can't think unless you give me something to think about. And that comes through questioning. So we need to plan those higher order thinking questions out. Don't just assume that we know it's happening in the classrooms. So that we know that our programs are effective that we're purchasing. Because we have to remember curriculums don't teachers teach, but the curriculum is a very healthy help. So we have to know that it's working. We need to know the resources that we're going to use. And that's the key part, right? The resources. Because that's what you're responsible for, the resources. How do we know that they're effective? We know they're effective through the SLO process. We know that they're effective through our assessments. Of course, we're going to plan out that assessment, and then we have to have student indicators. Where are the kids? What are we going to do with the kids who score 0 through 40? on an assessment. What are you going to do for them? What's that small group look like? What does the small group look like for the 40 to the 60? What does the small group look like for the 60 to the 75? And what does the small group look like for the 75 maybe to 100? What are you going to do for them? And for those kids who are already at 100, how are you going to enrich them? And of course, that's the small group. And we've done all of that. We need to empower our teachers. We need to make sure that we're creating a culture of safe feedback so they can give that feedback, the true feedback that they feel about the things that we have, our resources that we're using. Right? And we have to have a little bit of thick skin sometimes for that. And we never leave conversations without next steps. So we're saying this doesn't work. Now we need to research how it doesn't work. I have to go in this classroom and actually look at them using it. I have to go in the classroom and I have to see the assessment. I have to see how students are being assessed. I have to look at those PLCs. All of those things play into next steps. So we can't leave that conversation without a next step. And also we can empower them through the Professional Learning Library, which is a free resource. When you go into SCE at the top, there's a learning tab up there. That's the Professional Learning Library where teachers can, anyone, actually, if you have access to SCE or the Learning Hub, you can go out and earn free renewal credits. And there are classes there for SCTS, all of those things.
I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna go back to one of your slides. So this slide here, especially some of you who work with Title I in finance or the money people, the resources. We usually want to do an inventory for Title I. Why don't we do an inventory to see what do we have in our district? Okay, you've been buying stuff for 4 or 5 years, and we don't know what's in the district. We just keep buying the same thing, and somebody says, "Oh, we had that over at Pate, or we had that over at North Parksville, or we had that over at Timron, and all across the school district." But we don't know what we have, but we keep buying stuff. Okay, to understand your resources. With the questions still, with Dr. Fred was talking about, across the district, there was one district that I was working with. They actually had question stems posted in every classroom. That's what their PLC, so that kids can see what good question. And when they're in their student groups, they looked up the question stems in order to ask questions up there when they're in their small groups or when they were working on some type of project. They could look up at the question stems so they could understand what good questions are.
Hey, Dr. Edwards.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to add something about the resources, because especially for people that are working in federal programs, one thing that you might consider asking your schools to do is a return on investment. How is this impacting the students? So if they purchase something, then the question becomes, how many students, does this impact? And how does it impact? What are the end results as a result of using or employing this particular resource?
Right. I see several of my Institute for District Administrative students in here. I'm not taking raise your hand. But what we always talk about is that as leaders, we like to plan and do. We like to plan and do, plan and do. We don't ever study or act on what we've done. We don't study to see if it worked. We don't research it, and then we don't decide whether we need to abandon it, adopt it, or adapt it. We don't go on to the next thing. Or we go on to some conference or some other school district doing something totally different in a different way, and we bring it by that. So what we need to do a great job is to assess where we are and what we're doing. And then look there that word assessment. What type of assessment are we doing in our district, and are we getting to return on those assessments? So I'm here for the data exchange. So the last few days, you heard speakers, you understood some different things that you might need to go back to your district and change. Today, Dr. Fraser talked about PLCs, SLOs. But there's something that you need to go back and to enact. You know you might not be doing what you need to do, and you need to make some changes. Now, okay? So what we need to understand, especially we can about how well we are doing in education. All right? We can find out how well our students are doing on assessment. So what we understand is that we must enact some changes. We know that. Okay? So in doing that, we have to understand what are we talking about changes. Changes occur, they can be predictable, okay? Not in South Carolina, the seasons aren't predictable, but okay, they could be predictable. They could be abrupt. Who ever thought that there would be wildfires in Carolina forests? Okay? And then we also can look at that they could be highly unpredictable events. So change, when you're dealing with change, we go through a lot of different things, but it's a powerful force and it's constant. So at your tables and with the elbow partners or find someone, we ask two questions. What about change, if anything, is uncomfortable to you? And then, what is it about change initiatives that frustrate you? Go ahead and start the clock, Dr. Fraser. We'll give you 1 minute to talk right there about change. What is it about change? Last out, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Tell me about change. I heard you say some stuff. Tell me about change. What you got? What you see?
I was saying that it's difficult for me to make changes, or I feel what is the uncomfortable if I don't know the importance of it, or enough communication hasn't taken place for me to understand the importance of the change and what it's going to result.
Let's see. That's my friend Fred. Fred, what you got? What you got with the last of the initiatives? What frustrates you?
Well, I would say, things that are not necessarily thought out or what have you. That can create a certain degree of frustration. Because as my table may indicate, if we adapt to the change or what have you, we can be willing to change and adapt to the change. But then once we've adjusted to the change, we change it again.
All right. So those things do come about when we start talking about change. So let's look at some of that. Right? That first one sticks out. That tells you right there, whatever change you thinking about going back to do at your district office or district or your department or your schools, if you don't do it right, it's a failure. 7 out of 10. All right? 1/3 of major change initiatives fully meet the goals set. You know why? They don't go back and look at the goals. If they hit a bump, it fails, they stop. The bump is part of the process of change. All right? 50% of the leaders don't know whether the recent organizational change initiative or changes succeed. Oh, we did something. We set the plans to fact. We got all these plans. We did it. We wrote a great one, put it on 5 pages of cardstock. We got it on. nice notebook. Don't know. And then the last thing, 37%. I'm gonna tell you this, that number can be 73. That number can easily be 73. I might have made the mistake and put 37. It matters where you are. Okay? Resistant to change. Okay? So why are we talking about this? We're going to talk about the change curve here. Because what you're about to do, if you're going back to make some changes from stuff that you heard today or something, even something that Dr. Frazier said, or if you know you need to make changes, you're going to have to get something. And it's called the change curve. But what I'm going to be able to do is give you some specific steps in order to master change. So in your mind, you're going to go back tomorrow. Let's wait till next Monday. You're going to go to next Monday with some changes. Okay? All right? Don't do it tomorrow. It's going to make a break and figure out the way to be. So don't worry about it. Let's go Monday. You got time to think, so we're going to go Monday. What we're about to do. So this is the change curve. So you're about to go and make a change that you know will work. We need to go do PLCs right. Something just as simple. But maybe their mom brought the PLCs to the district way back 20 years ago, and then we've been doing it that way. So when you start getting bringing people these new things that you're planning to change, they're going to go through denial. Then they go into resistance. Then they'll get into exploration, and then they get into commitment. All right? When you start that change, they always really think about the past. That's not the way we used to do it. It's not the way they did it. When they start resisting, it's all about self. What I got to do. What I need to do. Nothing about they. All right? If we can get them to start exploring and trying it out, then they can start focusing on the future. Okay? All right, so when you see these extra slides will give you what people say when you make that part of the change curve. What are they going to be doing is the yellow box, but what you should be doing is the green box. Okay? So the first thing, they're in now. So you got to change. You're going to make a change. You're going to start going in and redoing the way you do professional development at this big district in the state of South Carolina. You're going to change the way they do it. They're going to go into denial. This too will pass. My grandma used to play this song. This was James Cleveland. That's it. I had heartaches like this. Oh, man. Disappointment like snow. And disappointment the soul. Everybody say, this too. Okay. All right. Thank you, DJ. You're gonna go and do some strategic planning. It's a pass. Especially the people that have been there a long time, they done seen them. They done got all the notebooks of the changes of the strategic plans. All right? They got all the t-shirts for the new slogans. So what's going to happen is you got to understand as a leader, denial is a natural feeling. Let me put it up. You've been eating carrots and drinking broth and eating celery all since January. And you go to that man in the stethoscope and he puts you on that thing that has the numbers that spin or digitally, and it ain't even budget. That's denial. That's what everybody goes through. You start coming with the change, they're going to go through denial. It's natural. So don't get upset. You know they're going to go through denial. Just know it. It's going to be a blame game. Trying to figure out who told them to do that. Why did that person in the office of transformation, it ain't transformation no more, but they'll still be blaming the transformation office. All right? They don't be finger pointing. Email says, Barry Norman. Yeah, that's it. Get you out there. Wax and tell him. Then they start questioning. Why are we doing this? But you as the leader should be read the room. You can't get upset. You know they're going to hold it out. You know they're going to question the change. Give proper time. Don't answer any questions. Listen, I want you to just think about this, what we're about to do. We're going to start this in the next few weeks. Provide everything. Because some people need some steps. What are the steps? Some people you're going to need to tell a story. Some people you're going to actually need to say, hey, why don't you check out this district? They're already doing. See what they're doing. All right? That's the matter. If you can get into now, this is the next tough one. It's about me and resistance. Bob Dylan is moving out by Bob Dylan. I don't know where it's at. You ain't going nowhere. So when people in your district, in your organization, in the school that you come up with this change, they already in the doubt. This is not going to happen. I put my head in the sand. These go away. It ain't going away. Now it's time to fight. But you gotta understand, as a leader, we think that the kids are the good fighters. Adults are the best fighters. There's some people good at fighting. And if you are a naive leader and think you can go toe to toe with people, you're gonna want to find out. They're gonna sick out. They'll get everybody to sick out. All the grandmas gonna die. They're gonna go to funerals. They're gonna figure out a way to drag on your change. They're gonna show some anger. They're gonna start refusing and they're gonna start complaining. They might even write a letter anonymously to the board and tell the board how crazy you are. Anonymously. Now, you as a leader, what you should do is listen to them. Just guess what? They might have some points that can help you out. Some opinions. Just listen. Don't blame. Don't get angry. Don't take it personal. Because it's not you. They thinking about self. Don't even try to reason. Hey, no. Eugene, you should know. You start going on with Eugene gonna go toe to toe for it. What you should do is listen, take some good notes, but always keep it focused on the importance of the change. Okay? So we got them through denial, they done drug the feet, we got them through resistance. Now we're going to start seeing the light. Everybody, cool. All right, I can see clear now. You get them into the resistance, actually exploration then. So out of resistance, exploration, now they can start seeing the future. They'll start showing energy. But the easiest way for you to do this, you have to do some pre-planning. You got to bring this change. You got to find some change champions. So people that's going to be going into the teacher's lounge and talking for you about the change. Going to be in those group chats because they're going to be talking about you in the group chat. Have you ever got that message in the group chat? They say, "Oh, we need to send it to you." They're going to be talking about it. where they at? Oh, they at this. Yep, Issa, right? Issa meet. What kind of Issa meeting they got? Oh, they gonna come out with some changes. So, but the people you get them to start talking about the future and asking questions, now you got them. And then, but now you as a leader can't be sending emails, you can't be sitting behind the desk. You got to roll your sleeves up and get into the change. If we're doing PLCs, you need to be doing PLCs with them. You're talking about strategic planning, you need to be at some of the strategic planning meetings. You know, those are after hours. You got to be in there doing it. You got to demonstrate and help others learn those new skills that you're making the change with. So, got them through the night. Got them through resistance. They can see the light of inspiration. Now we're going to ride them into commitment. I paid my you get them into commitment. They can then show confidence. When they were in exploration, you allowed them to fail. Try out some new things. They got the hang of it. Now they're in the commitment. They're going to work efficiently. They know the protocols. They know how to do things. They're focused on improvement. They're not worried about self. All right? When they're in commitment, it's about us. It's about the goals of the group, goals of the school, goals of the district. We're not worried about self. You as a leader, 9 times over, even if it's small meetings, even if it's just coming to the meetings on time, PLC meetings, celebrate it. But you also need to capture the lessons learned, because this won't be the last change. How do all those people that thought, oh, we got through the English curriculum standards changing, that was the last change. What just changed now? Math. But if you got the lessons learned from English, it's the same change. Maybe different, it's a different subject, but you're going to go through some of the same processes. Also, if we can get people into commitment, this is where culture is formulated. This is when you start understanding the Richland Warren way, the Darlington way, the Jasper way, the Calhoun way. Then you understand those ways. So, what does the change leader do in the now? Clear communication. Understand that you need to show some data. I got to show the processes and the procedure. This isn't the time to be keeping it tightly under the vest. This is the time to be vulnerable and being transparent about what's about to happen. No, it's not can't be gotcha. I think somebody said it because you don't understand how to communicate it. If you're about to make a change, you need to communicate. When they're about to get into resistance, you gotta listen. Also, it's time for you to start finding those change champions. Okay? Because another thing about change is there's people ready to sabotage your change. In your school or district, wearing the same shirt that you got on. Okay? They're good at sabotage. But what you gotta do is find those change champions. Exploration, offer training. Yeah, after you start delivering the resources. Opportunities for engineers to learn without fear of failure. Okay? Then when we get into commitment, this requires dynamic support. This is requires support. You got to be at every meeting. You got to be understanding, talking with people, getting their feedback, finding out what they need, and then be able to recognize the achievements. Sign some certificates. Go to Holly, sign some thank you notes. Celebrate the change. Because here, commitment leads to culture. Questions? TLG, Rashonda.
How does that work? Because I'll be honest, this is the first I've heard of it. So TLGs, I'll give an example of the TLG. So in Charleston County, we didn't have to write SLOs. So I came from a teacher standpoint. I'm like, how do you know what I'm doing? How do you know this is effective? I like feedback. Whether it's good or bad, I want feedback. So my TLG was that one thing I noticed about high school Mary Ford, which Mary Ford is in North Charleston, is from one of the bottom of the average, and the district wasn't know what happened. What happened? The problem was that no one looked at the data. The students were doing well. That's what the problem was, writing. So I wrote a writing plan for grades 3 through 5. When I released them, the PLCs that was out, the titles, what I was going to talk about in the PLCs, how to look at the data, and who was bringing it to work. I wrote a strategic plan about how that was going to happen, starting in August all the way until testing time, March. We had benchmarks along the way that I created for our teacher leadership coach. Because I was a teacher leader. I'm an academic coach. I'm a teacher leader. I'm leading the teachers. And I even put in my plan that I was going to the classroom, how I would rotate for small groups. Because my teachers didn't know. And I didn't know what was going on too. So I put myself into the plan about wanting to conduct small groups for writing with the teachers. That was an example of the teacher leadership. So how is that then going to lead teachers? So that you have how to do the outcomes. But it has to be data. Right? We're looking at the data. Another example is that Kelly Ellis Elementary School, we looked at the data for our students all the way, they didn't do well in measurement and geometry. Why? Because it's part of the need. So I actually rewrote the math plan. I rewrote the math curriculum, so they have a curriculum book that they still use along with our grades. I put anchor charts in it, examples that you use, and red line examples, all those things. That was a part of my teacher leadership goal. I took my summer to do it, and I said that I would do how I would set up the classroom, what our CLCs would be based on, how we would look at that data, how it's moving. And I'm going to measure that too before Christmas. Because fractions is always before Christmas, and the kids forget. So I'm going to measure that in January before Christmas and fractions when we came back in January. So just think about looking at the data, they need to look at the data and create a plan on how they're going to do those two things. And it goes with GDP and the SLO. I mean, in the SLO. So where it says goals, that's what that teacher leadership goals.
Here's our contact information. This is Rashonda's.
And you guys call us. We're not serious.
Oh, it's not that. Edwards at ed.sc.gov. He's going to do it.
Thank you so much for, let's give them a round of applause for their great presentation.